All right. Welcome, everyone, to Imposter King Stadium. I'm joined by none other than Sam Dando, or Notorious BLT, or Drip Drop Dando. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here and watch this game with two of our good friends facing off. And hopefully, I can fill the seat of Dan, which is a very big seat to fill, but I'm hoping I can do my best.
Awesome. I was putting on an echo for a little bit there just to see what's up, but but I think we're good now. Who are who's playing today? Can you give us a quick rundown on
Yeah.
who our competitors
So we
are?
have longtime Imposter King champ Dan, who is also known for his excellent casting abilities, versus one of my long-term good friends, Levi, also known as I'm a Papaya, who has been an expert player in any game he touches, and Imposter Kings is no different. So I'm very excited to see both of these champions face off today, one of the new age and one of the old age, and see which kind of strategies develop and who comes out on top. Who are you thinking that you're looking forward to seeing most?
So Dan has obviously been a contender for Imposter Kings, a caster. He kind of knows the ins and outs of the game. Papaya is a very solid card game player. He is very methodical, and you've played tons of cards with him before, so you can tell me. I think you're
Mm-hmm.
the chaos to his zen, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm definitely the more field-based crazy person, and he's the I'm gonna calculate everything and make the best possible play I can in this moment.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a flesh and blood pun there too, because I know how much he doesn't like those new.
Yep.
but uh, but yeah, no, okay, cool. I think what we're gonna see actually from both sides here is probably some methodical play. I think Dan's got the edge of knowledge in terms of how many reps he's played, but I think Papaya's
Hmm.
got. As I think I've mentioned in your game, you and him have played quite a lot, and a lot of the meta that we have transitioned over the time, going from soldier successor, soldier throwaway, queen, princess viabilities, whether the soldier is good or not. Those are things that have come and gone through the time with Imposter Kings. And what you and Papaya bring is actually a new look to that. And one of the new things, I mean, I think I was saying it a lot, which is Papaya tends to always think that going second means that you win.
Yep. He has two big things that differs from the meta that's kind of evolved throughout your guys' playtime, which is going second is great because he values card advantage. And then on top of that, he highly values the Fool, thinking that the Fool is the best card in the game.
That's
So
right.
anytime he has the Fool, he is going to try to optimize that so that he can maintain higher card value and then also force his opponent into a place of attrition, basically.
Yeah, is he? So I mean, yeah, that is a unique point. I think actually it's the first person who's said the fool is probably the most valuable card. Face value, it seems like it because you're gaining a card, but it's so hard to play. There's only
Mm-hmm.
three ways in an 18 card standard. Is he going to? Is he the type of person who will keep it even if it seems very unlikely to use, or is it that good to him?
Yeah, he sees it as being if he has it, I don't think I've ever seen him throw it away in times that I can remember us playing because he always can value the cornering of the opponent to capitalize on their king flip. So he's
I
always
see.
going to kind of look for that out. Or if anything, if he gets into a bad place with it, he can trade it off with Princess or swap it with Sentry. So there are still utilities he can use with it, but I will be very surprised if he ever gets rid of the Fool if he has it.
Okay. And on the other side, we have Dan, who, again, standard plays, but also likes to go with the tricky stuff. We should see a couple of good batteries, some good Inquisits, and typically he likes to use the abilities to their max. So it'll be interesting to see, how he uses some of the more trickier cards like the Sentry and the Mystic to his advantage. I say let's go head on into the Imposter King Stadium and see what's going on.
Yeah, excited to watch this.
All right, so here is the opening hand. Let me make sure that you can see that as well. So you can see this. It's a pretty good one. We have Papaya has both royalty and two oathbounds, and it looks like. Hold on, let me just make sure we get into the stadium here for everyone involved.
Yeah, I was like, you could cast the cards in their hands for me.
That could be fun, but I think it's actually more fun if you're helping out too. So let me grab this. Let me toss it over to you, and head on back to the stadium. So they've already gone ahead pretty quickly here, so I'm going to back up just a second here and show two nines, two sixes. Papaya decides to. Oh no, Dan decides to go first. On the other side, Dan's got two eights and two sevens, a pair of eights, a pair of sevens, and the assassin. This is actually a really interesting beginning hand because all the low cards are out of the way and it's a slugfest, right?
Yeah, and of course, look at that. Papaya has the fool, so I'm sure he's super stoked about that, especially having the oath bounds. But it's definitely going to be a battle of card advantage because even though Papaya has the ability to play over cards with oath bound, he's going to get kind of beaten down earlier with the higher card cost value that Dan has in his hand right now.
Yeah, and immediately off the gag, I mean, they went really fast here. So going back to the initial play, Dan goes first. He decides to Inquisit, hits on the princess. Papaya playing kind of the conservative, throw the zealot down as a successor, not protecting any of his cards from the Inquisitor. Doesn't seem to mind too much. Plays the princess. Dan plays the elder right on top of it immediately. Now is left with his pair of sevens and pair of eights. So he's got his value cards in hand and his assassin in the hide. What do you think Papaya is thinking here? Do you think he needs to Inquisit? So he is going to Inquisit, and he's going to pull the king's hand rather than the assassin if that was the case. This is a smart play from Papaya because what he's doing is he's ensuring that if he did Inquisit the assassin and he's correct, it's going to get king's handed. This is just guaranteeing the card that he's pulling, right?
Yeah, it is a little scary though because he doesn't have any more information cards because Judge is out and both soldiers are also in possession of Dan and out of the game. So he no longer has any ability to check for his opponent's hand unless he's going to use the Fool to get an
Yeah.
Inquisitor back, which looks like he decides to pick up the Princess and he just wants to play
Ooh.
Beatdown, which is
Oh,
actually quite good for him.
yeah. He's made the evaluation very quickly that, hey, Dan, you played your elder already. I threw away the other elder, and I have both oath bounds. This is a real sticky situation for Dan. Now he's going to have to essentially, um, I don't know. There's no way out, right? The line
Yeah,
is determined at this point.
play both Royals and he wins the
Oh,
game.
but
So,
now he has to
oh,
play a sentry. This is what I was talking about. Dan actually, he's very good with using the cards to his
oh, very
advantage.
nice.
Pulls the elder as a safety. Luckily for him, Papaya doesn't have any more Inquisitors, or there's no more Inquisitors in the game to pull that elder out. So now Papaya, it was in a for sure winning position. He still has to consider the assassin. So he was going to go for I'm going to just beat you down because I have everything I need to win. Dan's reversed that, not knowing that Dan does not have the assassin in his hand right now. So that's kind of a crazy situation right now. My God.
Yeah, and he's
What?
definitely treading on some dangerous ground, especially because he doesn't have any other ways to find information about what's in Dan's hand at this point. So he kind of just has to play off the cuff and either hope that he has enough card advantage. And he could think that the assassin is out of play or that another soldier is out of play would be kind of a hard thing to read at this point. But he is in a scary position because if his opponent does have soldier, it's another higher value cost card and so that way he would have to play out both royals at this point. So I'm very curious to know if he's trying to think if there's anything that he could get Mystic that would, because if Dan does Mystic threes, it doesn't really, it would actually be worse for Dan, right?
Yeah.
Because he has both elders. So I'm sure
Hmm.
he's contemplating that in his mind as well.
I think so. I think what Papaya is thinking right now is if I play this princess and swap, what is he going to give me? Right? He's not going to give me the elder, obviously. So what is that mystery card? And if he thinks it's the assassin, right? If he's trying to be safe, then he would get the assassin and he would win against Dan. So I think that's kind of one of the lines he was thinking of. But now he decided to go with the Oathbound and just play it out slow. So now Dan's got to play his Mystic because he's got to essentially force. He's got to force the royalty play, and this is one of those situations where having both royalty is not great. The queen and the princess, they don't really work well together sometimes, both lore wise and in the game. And so if he does try to do a force swap with the princess right now, he unfortunately will have to get up the queen. However, he can play the queen right now, force the flip, and and swap his other remaining card. However, the assassin, as we know, is face down right now. Right now, Papaya knows for a fact that either the assassin is the successor or thrown away, or the face down card, because he knows that Dan has the elder in his hand.
So this actually looks like it's, oh wow, Levi goes for the crazy play and just flips. I think that actually just sealed the game for him. I was going to
He
say, because if he
he
plays
has
out a
to.
royal, he loses. But yeah, this was his only way if Dan didn't have the assassin. So that actually, I think, just locked the game for him.
Yep. Yeah, because now he could just double up the assassin here, or sorry, double up the royalty here and win the game. He knew that he couldn't have the assassin, right? Because the assassin would have,
Oh yeah,
uh,
because you got the elder back
yeah,
from the sentry,
exactly,
so there was no
exactly.
assassin. Yep.
So swapping makes sense, and being able to swap it just ensures it because he's giving him a card he knows he can't play. So it's it didn't matter whether he swapped or not, but it was kind of like it's a style thing. At the end of the game, you decide. So I'm gonna go back to if you for those of you who have used the observer before, you can press left and right on the keyboard. It's really cool. Let's head back to step just step one actually. So number 7 out of 26. He plays the Inquisitor, calls out the princess. Really cool. So we keep going forward. He plays the Elder. At this point, this is where Papaya realizes, hey, you know what? He just played his Elder. I know where the other Elder is. I have two Oathbounds here, right? At this point,
Mm-hmm.
Papaya had carte blanche to kind of go with whatever he wanted. And going with the assassin, the only thing he had to be worried about is the assassin. And as we know, when we rock forward a little bit further, he calls out the king's hand, plays the Oathbound, grabs the princess. Now at this point, he's like, okay, I'm going to squeeze Dan. Dan quickly countered by grabbing the Elder, which was a smart play. But at the end of the day, the one thing that Papaya took advantage of is that double nine, double six, and I know where the Elders are advantage.
Yeah, and as we can see, kind of what we were talking about pre-game, Levi goes second, and he capitalizes on using the fool to regain card advantage. So exactly the plays that we had suspected is what he utilized to win that round. So
That's right.
already seeing right out the gate his very signature play style of maintain card advantage and just kind of squeeze my opponent out of the game.
Yeah, and again, that fool came out at a pivotal time to pick up that princess. That's the one downside of using your elder is it leaves the princess up and ready to grab. So I maybe would have liked to see Dan flip a little bit earlier there, but as we said, it's really dangerous to flip, especially when the other player has an inquisitor and you have one answer to the royalty.
Yeah.
So that flip would have made it so the elder was the only thing he could have used. He still had the sentry to be able to pick up something, but that queen is also really potent with the disgracing ability.
Yep. And as
So
Goose has mentioned, where he kind of sees the queen and the fool acting as oil and water and preferably doesn't like having them played in the same hand. Levi
yeah.
and I feel very differently about that. We actually like having the queen and the fool because we can kind of control the board state how we would like. So, granted, Levi had a good, I'm sorry, I keep switching between Levi and Papaya, but Papaya had a pretty good ability in terms of controlling board state when he wanted to, and seeing when the queen came down at the very end. So he still had full control over whatever he wanted throughout the course of that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I think he got both royalty. He got the full. Those are some nice cards to have as the player who's going second there.
Yeah,
So
very
now
strong hand.
we're going to another hand. Both hands were actually really interesting that last game, and we're kind of seeing something similar, where we've got assassin, to a pair of eights, as I call them, royalty, and 9 8s, 8 7 with a assassin versus a mystic, a royalty, 2 6s, and the 6 1. There's two OB sneak potentials here, meaning two oathbounds, two to OB sneak. What do you think of this hand? How are you going to evaluate this one?
Um, First off, it seems like if Dan goes first, which he is, he can kind of block Levi out of the game with his fives. I think if he's going to look for an early battery opening with the judge into soldier to try to maintain board so Papaya can't access his hand with inquisitors. I think that's probably what we're going to see. He could open with Oathbound as well, but I think it's kind of going to be a game of Dan trying to keep Papaya off of his ability to play the Inquisitors for as long as possible.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's got the
Dan also
mystic
doesn't
too.
have, yeah, he doesn't, outside of the Mystic, he doesn't have any way of accessing the King's Hand or the Assassin. So having to play around the Assassin this hand is going to be kind of tricky. Well, we
Ooh,
could see
yeah.
what Papaya does with it as well, but I think it's definitely going to be a game of playing on a knife's edge for both players.
I thought it was kind of interesting he decided to go first. One of the things I would consider, one of the lines I would consider as Dan, just spitballing here, is obviously you got 6 1 sneak, you got battery, you've got just playing a 6, not knowing that obviously the soldier is face down here, but even just playing 5 without hitting causes lots of problems actually for Papaya early on to have to play some of the bigger cards. One of the lesser things that most people don't use, and Dan might use this because I use it against him all the time, is actually using Oathbound into Mystic in order to hit the eights. And that's pretty devastating because there's no King's Handing that. As you mentioned, there is that assassin thing where, oh, you got to be careful about the assassin, and maybe the Mystic is the only recourse to that. But there is something to be said about hitting the eights with the Mystic, and having it not be something that you can retaliate against. For
And Dan
those of you at
does
home,
have
using the Oathbound means that they cannot. The card that you play after the Oathbound gains immune to King's Hand.
Dan also having the Fool does allow him some more sustainability throughout the round as well. Levi could end up King's handing the Fool just out of that, unless Dan opens with the Oathbound Mystic, which also could be his only way to really play out throughout these hands to get rid of the eights. So I'm actually very curious to see if that's the line he ends up going with,
Mm-hmm.
because whether he opens with the battery to go Judge into Soldier, he does turn on his Mystic with the assumption that he hits.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Yeah.
think we're probably going to see the Judge opener here since he threw away the Oathbound. So let's see what he calls. What would you call if you were playing Judge? Would you call Assassin to see if you're safe? Would you call something you kind of know you can guarantee your hit so you can get the Soldier in?
Well, being said, if I knew the soldier was here, I absolutely would call the assassin because I know for a fact that he's still going to have to play over a five.
Yeah.
And that would be great for me. But also going with the standard King's Hand, like what he's doing, that's a pretty good start too. So I think he is going to go for the battery. I really like the fact that Papaya kept the assassin in hand here, because and there's the battery. We call the judge into soldier a battery because it's just such a powerful charge up ability. You have a guarantee. Oh, there's the flip. So he's going straight for the flip here to deal with the battery. Luckily for Dan, this automatically makes it a 2 point loss if he does lose. That's nice for him. Papaya is playing conservative here in order to make sure he wins this round. As I mentioned, I really like the fact that the assassin is in hand, and Dan's checking for it right now. And he's going to have better information now because since Papaya flipped, his successor is in hand, and if his assassin was his successor, he now knows for a fact that by calling soldier, he knows whether Papaya has the assassin.
And I'm sure Papaya is in a he's probably very happy about this position because yet again he's able to go second. He's able to get his extra card advantage off of the early judge flip to deny Dan the ability to get the judge back again with his fool. This is something that we do a lot when we play together with the early flip so that we can kind of keep the board maintained because Papaya also doesn't have any cards to control the board at this point. Dan has the whole ability because he doesn't know Soldier is out, but Dan is the only one with the ability to disgrace cards at this point. So I'm sure Papaya wants to try to minimize the high value cards that Dan could get so that he can still squeeze him out of being able to play the game. What I'm
Yeah,
interested to see is what he decides to King's hand or if he's just going to use it as an eight.
this is tough. So Dan, if he plays the Mystic into Assassin, that's gonna be King's Handed, and that's pretty much all she wrote. I think. I
Yeah.
think right now he needs to do the 6-1, and I think that's what he's considering. He has to do his OB sneak now. Not ideal. I'm still thinking about the line, but in order to get by a little bit more time, it's just that Papaya has such a strong hand. I think what you're saying is that position is really strong that Papaya has, and I'm not seeing a way out of it right now for Dan, and I think he's starting to realize that too. It's really tough with the assassin and King's Hand on one side.
Yeah, and he has all the cards in the world and all the time. He doesn't need to Papaya doesn't need to make any of the plays to have to kind of grab the initiative. Dan is the one who's kind of having to decide to make the plays, and Papaya just has to sit back and just kind of wait for him to fall into any one of his traps, whether it be he runs out of cards, he has to flip and get assassinated.
Goes with the
Um,
goes with the queen to see whether he can.
Interesting.
He's basically checking to see if Papaya kept an elder. I think, um, and he did. So,
His yeah, that it could be a good line too if he wants to just play for the
hmm
fact of I can win this game if Elder is out of the game, if both elders happen to be out of the game.
hmm
That's always a good thing to consider in games too, where you just have to kind of go for the I guess the YOLO play, but
I think the
let's just
line,
see if we
yeah,
have my one out.
I think the line here is you play the Mystic and you actually don't use its ability because then what happens is that you force them to play a higher value card and you can 6-1 grab the queen. But it's not a winning line anyways because yeah, this is what we're talking about. The Mystic comes out, he does choose to use its ability, which means that it's King's Handable, gets King's Hand away, and it's looking pretty dire over here for for Dan. And you said Papaya loves the fool. He knows the counters to the fool too. When Dan played a judge, one of the downsides of playing the judge is that your opponent can flip and there's no repercussion. So Papaya effectively took away one of his fool plays by doing that. The
Yep,
full
he's
play,
always
if you will.
thinking, yeah, if he doesn't have the fool, he assumes his opponent does, and then his game plan is how do I play around the fool getting any kind of value, and he makes it very difficult for the opponent. So that's another reason why he went for the early king flip, so that his opponent couldn't capitalize using the fool because he had already anti-chambered. So it
Yeah.
made it very difficult for Dan to find an opportune time to use the fool this game.
Yes, sir. I think this is probably all she wrote. Princess swap, whatever. It doesn't matter what they have. Oh, he even just uses the sentry, threatening Dan, and Dan has to
Yep.
flip, and there goes the assassin. So, as you mentioned, really strong hand, and yeah, Dan's gonna be beating himself up about this one. But the fool, Papaya's got the fool strategies on lock.
Yeah, it
We'll
was
have
just
Ben Dodd, the kid, make a puzzle out of this one. I'm sure.
it was difficult for Dan too, just because he had no real ways to pull the assassin, especially with Papaya having the king's hand, having that insulation from his hand and controlling both inquisitors really makes it difficult for Dan to be able to play out of that hand, I think. So
hmm
it was a very tough situation.
Yeah, I'm going back to step 33 so I can show at the beginning. I think this is what we were talking about all the different lines. He went with the judge, got the king's hand successfully, set up the battery, and Papaya I think wins it right here with this king flip. This king flip, although making it only a 2 point victory, I think it's smart to go for 2 point victories in this game. This ensures it because by flipping, he's now taken away the ability to use the fool. Dan's forced to play the soldier, and then after that, the squeeze started to be applied. He threatens, "Hey, you can use your oathbound sneak now, but it's not going to get you anything you need." And it was just a constant fight to prevent him from being able to stop this assassin from eventually rearing her face and getting 2 points.
Yeah, very well played. Again, showing the power of going second and just having a bigger card
That was the
advantage,
one
even
thing.
from the early on.
That was the one thing I was afraid of is after the game, the first thing I think Papaya is going to say to me, or maybe in the winners interview, losers interview, whichever he ends up in, going second, always seems to work whenever
Yeah,
he's playing.
because
We
he was
got it.
essentially two cards up that game, going second and flipping right at the beginning. He had two extra cards pretty much, so
That's
Dan
right.
really was limited.
That's right. And this game, so we're starting off, and we've got King's Hand shown and Princess randomly discarded. So Papaya is going to probably think he's got a way worse hand than he does, and it's not a very great hand.
I'm like 80% sure, maybe even 90% sure he's gonna mulligan this hand. If I
95% for
was
me. He's got
Papaya,
a
let's just call it like it is. He's gonna mulligan this
he's
hand.
he's gonna mulligan this hand, and that's a good use of the mulligan.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think some players when they're 4-0, sometimes what they like to do is Dan's deciding to go first again. This is definitely a mulligan if the other player's going first usually, but some players if they're ahead, they like to use these hands. He just mulliganed. Use these hands in order to try out minimizing their losses, so that way they can save their mulligan. Especially if it's around each mulligan's valued around 2 points, except for the first one, which is obviously prorated. And so if you can get it down to 2 points, then you could save your mulligan for when it gets closer, when pressure's on, etc. But this is a
Yeah,
great hand to mulligan, I think, especially
yeah,
not
for
knowing
sure.
what's face down. So
Yeah, especially not having the king's hand. With the king's hand being out of the game, that just makes it so much better for Dan too, just because he knows that he could just play big numbers and Papaya eventually is just going to run out of cards and not have anything playable. So we'll see now, especially also Dan had the fool, so Papaya was not happy, I'm sure, about anything in that hand.
hmm oh yeah, you think if he had the
Oh
full,
my
maybe he would
gosh.
have considered it? Oh, go ahead.
Princess is out again.
Yep.
And the eight. Wow, it's another alternate reality of the hands that we just
I
had.
This might be that build where I pushed a change that's called the anti-goose build. It just takes away his favorite card. Maybe had to find its way onto production. I'm just kidding, obviously. It is weird to have the same card out twice, unknown to both players. The Sentry, the other eight, is actually being shown. So it's kind of a similar
Yeah.
situation, but the hands are way different.
Yeah, so just looking at Papaya's hand now, and Dan is going first yet again. So Papaya Papaya is going second, and he has the Fool. So two of the things that he loves most in this world when he's playing Imposter Kings. So I'm sure he's actually not feeling too bad about his position here. He does have the Inquisitor so that he can protect himself from the Assassin. He also has the King's Hand and the Mystic. So he has a very resilient kind of like malleable hand where he can
Yeah.
kind of negate certain aspects of Dan's game plans. It's just kind of he is going to have to be careful because it is lower power. So
Now,
Dan can kind of beat him down with the sixes, I feel like.
yeah, if you were in Papaya's shoes and you still had your free mulligan, would you use it here?
I would consider it just because not having any oath bounds and your opponent having the seven and the other eight being out of the game with the royalty, I would assume if I was Papaya that he had both royalty, which makes this hand much more difficult to play. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that Dan doesn't have the princess, and we know this, we're thinking, oh, this hand is, I think not that bad. I'm sure he has ways to play around it. But I'm sure from Papaya's position, he's probably thinking, man, I don't know how I'm going to be able to play around Princess Swap in the end game, especially if he's going to have to utilize his King's Hand to stop an assassination or to try to get it, because that's really all he can King's Hand at this point. Dan's hand is very resilient to the King's Hand outside of if he wants to hit a judge or an Inquisitor. So he's going to have to just kind of sit back and ride the wave, I think, at this point. If you were
Yeah.
Dan, how would you open?
Well, I think what Dan's going to do is probably judge, and I think the biggest misplay that could happen, and it's not his fault misplay wise, it's just the luck of the draw. If he tries to judge a princess, that's going to be really bad for Dan because he's going to let Papaya
Yeah.
know, hey, I don't have the princess, and also you get a free five to play on. If he starts with the Oathbound theory, which is not a line that most people use outside of tournament play, starting with the Oathbound is really powerful in this case. He's going to have
Hmm.
a way better chance. And I think Papaya is going to be able to at least make this a 2 point game. Just because, as you said, he can flip and defend with the King's Hand pretty fast.
Oh, he just mulliganed.
Interesting.
So again, I think that
Interesting.
was from his perspective of thinking, man, he has double royals, double oathbound, and assassin. I'm probably just going to get beat down with card advantage. And the fact that he didn't have an oathbound to capitalize on his fool, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure he was getting very concerned about not even having his opponent be able to flip, which is where the only way he'd be able to utilize the fool would be. So I think it's not a bad mulligan considering the information that he had.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very curious to see how that hand would have played out if he didn't mulligan.
Yeah, that's definitely one to take back at some point and play it out because there's a lot of interesting lines. As I was mentioning, Judge, start, Princess, really bad for Dan. Oathbound, pretty good
Yeah.
evaluation. Inquisitor could be good if he pulls the King's Hand. The one thing that's missing, I think, from so King's Hand out, Inquisitor, much better hand. I was just gonna
Yeah.
say I would have maybe depends on the player. Papaya, obviously, I don't know him that much, but for me, I would have played that hand out knowing if I could get that 2 point, even if it was a 3 point. The momentum is a little bit different than mulliganing, but it might be that hey, let's just skip this and keep going. That might be a better. So I think it depends on the player how whether you mulligan that or not as well in terms of your mentality as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this hand is quite interesting because King's hand out yet again. He just does not want to play the game right now, it looks like. But Levi, yet again, goes second because he's choosing for Dan to go first. So Papaya wants to go second yet again. Yet again, he has the Fool.
Does he do
So,
that if he has both Inquisitors too?
yes,
Uh,
he pretty much always agrees that going second is better every
I
time.
love this. I love that.
So this is actually quite interesting for Papaya because even though he has the Fool, he knows that Dan has the Assassin, which is going to probably let Dan feel a little bit more comfortable flipping whenever he decides to flip. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure he's going to try to leverage that as best as he can. to get Dan in a position to where he feels fine flipping, probably on a royalty, or because that's really all he has to leverage at this point. And then once he does that, I'm sure we'll see the full drop and we can kind of see him flip the tempo at that point.
Yeah.
But getting to that point is going to be a little difficult, I would think. Well, maybe not,
Dan
because
threw away
Dan,
the Elder.
yeah, interesting. So he really, that is the only thing he has outside of Oathbounds would be to king flip on a royalty.
This is pretty crazy, I think, but I think what he's thinking is, hey, if I can pressure him to flip before I do, he's not going to be able to use that fool. He's not going to be able to OB sneak it for sure. Um,
Yeah. And I think Levi's thinking, I can't wait for him to flip so I can capitalize on the fool. I think this
right.
is going to be very interesting to see how Dan kind of controls the board to deny
He uses the
Papaya the
judge for
ability.
the Inquisitor. Sorry for interrupting. I just
Interesting. No, 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 that's
he's
fine. Yeah.
he's setting up the battery. He just I was gonna say this is the one situation. Now this is like the third battery we've seen, and I think this is the one that's going to be actually one of the strongest batteries. This is
Yeah.
going to set up the squeeze pretty early on. Looks like Papaya is going to use this time to check out to see what's going on the other side, making sure confirming the assassins there. Good idea. Now he knows what he's dealing with. He knows that he can't flip on, later on. So now he knows the game state. He knows he's got 5 cards to play. Dan's got 5 cards to play, but Dan's going first, and one of those cards is the assassin. So Dan's feel free to flip whenever he wants, but the issue, as you were mentioning, is once he flips, Papaya's going to use that to his advantage to pull another card.
Yeah, but we're going to see here the soldier, the best card in the whole game, utilize its ability quite strong here because Dan can either. Wait, what? Dan decides to not utilize the ability to disgrace and opts for it to just be a 5. That's very interesting. Why do you think he would do that?
I am trying to think. Sometimes, I mean, if you're scared of the Oathbound, maybe, but there's no.
But he controls
I
both
know, I know, I know.
Oathbounds.
That's what I'm
Maybe it was a
saying.
misclick. That's super interesting.
It's not a bluff either, obviously, since Papaya knows he has the assassin.
Yeah, very. I'm just gonna say it's a misclick, and that he was meaning to click fool, and he accidentally clicked the assassin instead, because that also makes it so that he can't mystic anymore, which would have been one of the benefits of being able to disgrace a card.
Right. Huh. Still perplexed.
I wonder if he's going to try to force Papaya into a position where he has to play the queen to
Yeah.
disgrace the board
Mm-hmm.
state before he
Yeah, he
flips so
has
that he
that.
can't get his fool. Yeah.
If Papaya doesn't use the swapping ability with the princess, the line is princess, oathbound into sentry. Oh, no ability. So he has the oathbound into sentry, and forcing the queen, and then he can flip on the queen.
Wow.
That's the line.
Sick.
If he can, if he's seeing it, the worst thing he could do right now is flip. I think because of the
Yeah,
fool.
if he flips, it's over. But if he goes Oathbound Sentry, he actually might be in a decent
He would be in a winning.
position.
He would be in a winning position. I think. I think. Uh,
Well, because if he flips, Papaya
he
has the Inquisitor to be able to pull Assassin at that point.
Yes, but he checked. He knows that Papaya has the assassin. Sorry, the Inquisitor with that judge play. That foresight on that judge play. If he judged and he didn't get that, that would have been a completely different game. So yes, that play isn't there. I don't think. Uh, wow.
Man, because yeah, now he's in a tough point where if he flips, he gives Papaya access to everything. And he
Within
would
reason.
have Mystic online at that point as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean maybe as Dan you do it anyways, so you can at least make it a 1 point. I think at that point he does Oathbound, Sentry, Queen, Flip. Papaya will Inquisit the Assassin, and then we'll have to play his Zealot, and then Oathbound, and so it'd be a 1 point loss. Oh wait, that would actually still be a 1 point win if
Yeah.
I did my math correctly. This is the worst part with me in chess. I can never actually think that many moves ahead, but I think it's Oathbound, Sentry. He plays the Queen,
Papaya plays Queen.
quit, flip.
Flip.
He has to play his Inquisitor and get the Assassin, otherwise he'll lose next turn to Fool because he can't
Oh,
play his
yeah.
Fool. So he has to Inquisit, gets the Assassin. He then flips, Gets his. He then has a zealot, fool, and then Dan can play the Oathbound and win.
Yeah, so Dan still wins the game at this point in time, if
Yes.
everything plays out the way that we just stated.
Yeah. Which it has to. I mean, there's no alternative unless Papaya wants to give up extra points here. I
Well,
mean,
here's the
in
crazy
terms of
thing.
decision, he can only flip or play the queen right now. Is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, to be clear.
Oh, well, no, because yeah, Papaya still has to pull the assassin because if he does not, he
Correct.
can't flip. So he
Correct.
would still lose. So that
I
is the
think
only line that he has.
I think I have solved this game much slower than AI would, but we got there at the end. So he flips
Very
here.
awesome way. Wow. That's really cool that Dan was able to kind of capitalize on the fact that Papaya had the queen as well and the fool. So almost because now we're seeing it backfire that Papaya now holding the fool has become his
Oh
downfall.
no! So Dan does lose with one because the zealot gets. See, I knew I was off by one. There's like an off
Oh,
by one
nice.
thing, which is the flip counts as a turn two, and then he has to play his oathbound. So that's exactly right. I mean, I think a lot of the players in the meta now view the queen as a detriment sometimes in your own hands for that
Hmm.
reason, um, and it's yeah. Didn't mean to interrupt, but this hand was pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean, Papaya still. So even though he didn't get to play the fool, going second, he didn't need it because he was up a card, and being up the card was the fool. But just having it and making Dan have to play in a particular way to not get punished by the fool essentially locked his victory regardless. So
Right.
again, going second, holding the fool, positioned himself in a way where he kind of got to sit back and have Dan have to make all the hard choices, and he just
Mm-hmm.
kind of had to play around him in a way. So very good way in execution of just showing Dan did a really great job of doing his best to try to play around both options.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, he just didn't have another card.
Yeah. And what was really interesting, I mean, going back to the beginning of the game, number 66, there's just like you're looking at the initial hands. He threw away the Elder, pocketed an Oathbound. It's just such an interesting idea here. He starts off with the Judge, asks for the Inquisitor, sets up the battery. I almost feel like Papaya always preps himself for the battery. In this case, he was just able to play a soldier. But the real turning point of the game came when we were making that decision of okay, what are you going to do after he plays his warlord? There's a lot of things to be scared of. He missed that soldier that we need to talk about at the end of or at the interview stage
Yeah.
because that
Mm-hmm.
was I'm wondering if that was intentional. But regardless, he can't play the mystic on the ones anymore. He was never having the intention to, I don't think, because then what happened was the play that we were talking about. And if Papaya didn't have that Inquisitor, this would have been lights out. Right
Definitely.
at the where Dan flipped, he inquisited, but again, I do, as you mentioned, I have to commend Dan for essentially uh, being able to turn this into at least just a 1 point loss. So all right, and
Man,
the luck does not seem to continue for Papaya here, as he's got the bluest and greenest colored hand I've seen, with of course none of the royalty or the upper echelons of the kingdom wanting to participate in this royal struggle. We've
Mr.
got
King's hand he's retired today. He
he's
just does
got
not want
he's
to play.
got. I mean, it's a timeline where maybe the king's hand wasn't able to actually harness the powers that he's been given. Read the lore. This is the randomly discarded king's hand, and then the queen is accused. So j'accuse the queen. The warden's keeping her up, in prison as she watches Papaya. She's like, I really could help Papaya's hand out right now.
Yeah, again, if I was Papaya, I'd be like, dang, this hand sucks. Like, how am I going to play out of this? Dan has the Fool, Oathbound, Princess.
he's
He has both
probably he's
Oathbounds.
pretty happy about that, the hand that he's got.
Yeah. I mean, he just throws away his Elder probably, and he's chilling with a really good hand. So I wouldn't be surprised if Papaya mulligans. I mean, he could try to play it out, but I could see this being just a 3 point game for Dan very easily.
Yeah, I mean, do you mulligan as Papaya here?
I mean,
I
if
mean,
you
even
evaluate,
I might. This
yeah,
is
I mean,
this is the
if you
comeback
evaluate
mechanic. Is RNG decides
RNG,
to yeah. Yeah, I
18
mean,
card standard.
if I didn't actually have access to the code, I would start questioning some things with some of the hands that Papaya's been getting, but But this is obviously, part of the game is mitigating your losses as much as possible. And this is obviously a hand that's not easy to play against. So Dan, famously going first. I don't think Dan should just always go first. I think Papaya immediately mulligans, wants to go next. So
Papaya just deciding to give all the points out this game, whether it be to his opponent or to himself. Every point that has hit the scoreboard has been by Papaya's decision
there we
making
go.
this
Yeah,
game.
that's hopefully he can convince some of the royalty to maybe change his mind. And wow, there we go, just like that, convincing mulligan from Papaya to really bring back some of the royalty into his hand. Now, to be honest, if I was Dan, this is a mulligan, right? Like, do you
Yeah.
mulligan this to, like, I mean, it's not a bad hand on his side at all, but it's like, and of course, Papaya deciding that Dan goes first. What do you think here? What's going on in each player's head?
Well, both players don't have the assassin because it's out of the game. So I'm
Hmm.
sure both of them currently are thinking, all right, how am I going to play around the assassin this round? Dan
Right.
also considering how am I going to play around it with the king's hand being on the opponent's side as well, which is very scary. I think this game will be planned around that. And then once both players just realize that neither player has the assassin, I think it's going to derail a lot of the plans. And I think it may be too late for one player, especially for Dan. Because if Dan
Yes.
does not decide to mulligan, he's going to be the one punished
Hmm.
more so for missing the assassin this game, I
And
think.
that's one thing I need to give Papaya credit for, and I'll say it on stream so he can replay it, I guess. But one benefit of going second is that if an assassin or a key card is out of the game, you might have the other player just reveal that for you. And it might be devastating to them.
Yeah.
Like Judge, Inquisitor, Soldier, all of those plays, all of those lines, if he tries to hit the assassin, that's no bueno. Other way around, though, is luckily Assassin in this meta currently, no one's been really calling for it early on. And he's also got that casual Oathbound play, too. So, but we know
I,
that from experience, Dan
yeah.
doesn't typically do that. So,
I think that Dan actually has to mulligan this hand. If he doesn't, I think he gets really scary because Papaya having the Mystic as well, and he just has so many big cards and the Mystic to just basically
mm-hmm.
nuke Dan's options. Okay, there we
Yep,
go.
there it
Whew.
is.
Close call, close call. Yeah, that could have been a very scary game if he decided not to mulligan.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to make a decision there. It's 5-4. You've been not really hitting anything this game with the cards you've been given. Papaya's played an immaculate game as well. So the decision is: do I mulligan and play a new game, or do I just not care and go for the anime style, give it my all? I don't care about assassins, blind flips. Um,
Yeah.
Clearly, the spectators at Imposter King Stadium are clamoring for blood. So it's it makes sense that you mulligan there, and
Oh my gosh, he's discarded cards yet again. Oh, King's Hand yet again on retirement, and then the Queen being the hidden card, which
both
I'm
players
sure.
probably think they have worse hands than they do.
Yeah, I
Like,
was just gonna say, yeah, both players looking at their hand going, man, this sucks because the other person has the queen. When yet again, it's like Dan honestly has a very weak hand
yeah.
comparative to Papaya.
Oh my gosh, and I just hope that the worry I have. So one of the things we're talking about is play style. Do you play it out, try to minimize it to 2 points, or do you just mulligan to get the momentum, and kind of go to the next thing, clear your head, that type of thing. This is one of those situations where you do not want to mulligan. And I'm worried he might, just because he doesn't know, and he wants to have like that final hand that's really good. Dan can't, so he's got to play this hand no matter what. I believe True King Papaya is going to decide who goes first here, and yeah, I just this is a real head scratcher.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because Papaya can just play big cards. I mean, he has the ability to just start playing numbers, and very quickly, Dan is going to run out of playable options, especially
If
with
he goes
Papaya having the
first,
Fool. Yeah, and I think that, well,
because
Papaya is deciding, and I think Papaya is probably going to just pick second because yet again he has Fool, he has Assassin, King's Hand is out of the game. He has the freedom to flip whenever he wants because there's no punish really other than the Inquisitors. But Dan just has a small hand. I don't know how he can capitalize this, especially with double Elder, which honestly makes it worse for him because Papaya doesn't have the Queen, so it's kind of just like a low cost card that's going to bite him in the butt eventually. It's a tough hand for Dan. Unfortunately, Dan has been dealt some pretty rough hands this game.
I think it's kind of swung back and forth on the unfortunate side of things, but I do think that man, I really feel like letting Dan go first is at least giving him a chance. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just
Yeah.
two Inquisitors, a judge. It's like, um, he might. Oh,
Ooh,
Papaya
here it
decides
is.
that. Hold on, I'm screenshotting that.
He
Papaya
said,
decides
I'm
that
going to
Papaya
play
goes
big
first.
cards.
We'll have to ask him if that's a misclick. So.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
I think he
we're
sees the
teasing,
writing on the
but
wall.
there is obviously times where it is better to go first if you're playing Papaya's game plan style, especially in a hand like this. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the right thing. Um, Dan immediately throws the Elder, throws the Zealot, and he still has to do that anime thing where he just has to either YOLO on the royalty side, big number side, or the assassin side. And we know the answer, so it's kind of fun for us.
Yeah, it's a little. I feel sad for Dan just because the writing on the wall for me at this point is just. It's unfortunate, but this game has been very tough for. I would say Dan entirely because every good hand he's had, he has not gotten to play because Papaya has mulliganed it away for him, and so he's kind of always ended up in like the back foot situation of this game. In particular, now with Papaya holding all the big numbers, the assassin, but he yeah, okay. The interesting thing is Papaya may think he has double royalty and Dan has both elders. So
Mm-hmm.
Papaya has to be able to flip or utilize an oathbound to save for one of the elders. Or
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, one of the
One of the
royalty.
royalty, yeah.
And I wonder, well, no, because even if that gives him the opening to Inquisitor, he has to pull a big number and he can't play over the big numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is we were all talking about how Papaya always goes second, but the game has presented a hand that would make it very hard for even him to decide to
Yeah.
go second. So I think bludgeon him with hard numbers, and uh, I think that he's got the game in the bag. Got the pair of soldiers. Just I mean, yeah, it's not great. The Dan tried to muster an army, and it fell short. So
I think what we're going to see, I think it's going to be I think Papaya needs to hold Assassin in his hand, and I think he will. I
yeah,
think the game is going to be Papaya plays the card, and I think Dan is going to YOLO flip and just say, I hope you don't have Assassin. Or he may try to just go opener, Oathbound into Inquisitor, call Assassin. And I think that has to be his line, right?
go open or what?
So he either has to go Oathbound into
Oh yeah,
Inquisitor or
yeah,
Judge into Inquisitor, depending on what Levi plays here right out the gate.
yeah. I think since he knows he has the princess, if he, I mean, again, it's tough because he don't know where the queen is, but otherwise he does have a really good hand to preserve a 1 point loss. He's got the judge,
That is
he's got
true.
the oathbound, he's got a zealot. So there's two really funny things that are happening here. One is if Papaya loses that oathbound somehow, then Dan wins. It could threaten a win with double royalty, which he doesn't have, but it's just like a thing that Papaya has to think about, right? Like he must be
Mhm.
scrambling to save that oathbound. Um, in any other case, if Dan did have that other royalty, he could have oathbound into Inquisit and grabbed the yeah. I mean, there's so many things, right? And so there's that thing, and then the second part of this is he could what you were just saying, or actually what I was kind of insinuating is that he can push this to a next game by losing by one by just trying to outlast. And it's all around that assassin. Get the assassin out of his hand using an oathbound inquisitor, as you were saying, and then slowly clawing your way back in to just getting rid of cards.
I
Chat is
think,
also talking about can we even do princess swap because he's going second. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just so interesting because Papaya is taking a very long time here trying to consider what his openings will be. I'm sure largely considering the fact that Dan has the queen
hmm
and he probably wants to try to get around a way where he won't lose value on his fool or where a way he can capitalize off of his fool, knowing that he has the soldiers, so he can kind of disgrace board state. And he doesn't really want to do that because it's not really incentivizing his fool plays.
one
But
thing
yeah,
to
Dan could go ahead.
one thing to quickly note here is that when you are sitting here and you notice that your opponent's taking a long time, there's actually
Hmm.
some gamesmanship about that too. If your opponent's taking this long, you can probably guarantee they don't have a queen in their hand. So you can actually use that kind of information to your knowledge or knowledge to your benefit, which is why is he just not bludgeoning me right now? Like, he has all the answers,
Yeah.
but potentially there's something that he's not seeing. It's not necessarily the queen, but it's just in general. Dan can make some assessments there. So he throws away the
Oh
assassin.
my gosh. Wow.
You did not
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
I kind of thought, honestly, when I saw his hand, knowing Papaya, I kind of thought, I wonder if he's going to throw away the assassin. Again, we know that the queen is out. He does not. If he kept the assassin, his hand is quite good. But now he's baiting Dan into the position of having to check for the assassin, and that could be very detrimental to his game plan.
Or it could be working just as planned. This soldier is really
Yeah.
powerful. I'm not sure if anyone disparages the soldier at all. Shout outs to people on the stream, but this is a really powerful soldier, right? This is a 7. Dan doesn't have answers to 7s. He can oathbound, he can flip, or he can play princess. This is where you have to go anime.
Oh
This is
man.
you have to decide whether you flip, stare him straight in the face, slap down a glass, fill it up with your favorite beverage and or whiskey, take the shot back and say, "I got your bluff." Flip the king. Losers bracket. If you lose, you go out of the tournament. This is it right here.
Yeah, if he flips right here, Dan is the champion. Like Dan is the man. I always love Dan already, but if he flips here, it's gonna be so hype. Because the scary part is if he plays for the assassin,
Yeah,
Papaya has created this illusion that when he flips, he may even guess again, oh, you have an assassin. So he's even playing around his double inquisitor by bluffing him out of the game. And
yeah.
if Dan hyper focuses on the assassin, he's going to be in a rough position.
So he has to make a decision. Is he gonna hyper focus on the assassin or is he gonna go straight YOLO?
Because I even could see a place where he goes oathbound into judge and uses the judge to scout for the assassin here before investing in
Oh,
inquisitor.
interesting. That is true. It's a bit conservative, I
Oh,
feel like. Go
and Dan
straight.
goes crazy and just throws the princess
Yeah, let's
down.
go. Let's go. You're gonna have to
Knowing
flip on
Papaya,
that. Or you can,
yeah,
oathbound sneak, but
because he knows he doesn't have an elder. He might be calling out the queen right now.
that's true. And the queen obviously would be really good against the fool too. Boy, their heads must be spinning right now. My head's spinning.
And he's playing princess ability to swap, going, man, what could you give me here? And he gives him the elder. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Wait.
this is some goose level play. Okay. All right. He gives
So
him the
Papaya
answer.
gives him the soldier and he gives him the elder, baiting him
He's,
into using it.
hey, use this elder so I could use these 4, 4, 5, 5, 6 in my hand. That's smart.
My
I love it.
gosh.
I love it. I love it. It's great. It's-
Oh, this is yeah, because he could, yeah, he man,
this this
I just
this
don't even know
hand
where he
these this
goes.
the beginning of this hand is I'm gonna request Ben Dodd to create a puzzle for. There's so many lines to this. So he takes it, he plays it. He's like, "What are you doing, man?" And Dan's like, "All right, now I at least can play every card in my hand at least once."
So again, if you're Dan here, when you play the judge, because I'm assuming he's going to play the judge, he could go Inquisitor and just try to hard call out the assassin. But
And
he has to
he
ask
could
for the
save.
assassin, right?
Okay, clearly I know where the assassin is, so everything I'm about to say with
Yeah.
is a grain of salt. But one thing I would consider is saving the judge oathbound zealot combo. You oathbound into judge, call out something you know, and grab the zealot into your antechamber or inquisitor or whatever. Really do the late thing. He calls the queen. That is unfortunate.
Uh-oh. That's bad. Yeah.
That's real bad news. Now, now Papaya's got all the information, and he's lost one of his get out of jail free cards.
Dan is taking a break. The pressure is getting to him. He needs to take a little step
Called a
away break
timeout.
for a second here. Timeout has been
Player
called.
timeout has been called. I'll go ahead and just double check, make sure everything's okay. But yeah, I mean, there's so many lines to this game, and I think, boy, that queen call might have been his death sentence here. He was rocking it with the princess here. I don't care much about the assassin. He says, I mean, he does still respect it. Swaps out the elder. Love that. Elder gets played. This judge call again. I would have really liked to see a line where he would play for the 1 point hand. I think this is, you're probably pretty certain that you're probably pretty. I guess that works. You're certain that you don't have a path to victory here. I don't think there's any way Dan can see a path to victory. So what I would hold on to is actually the judge and the oathbound and the zealot, and try to maximize your ability to weasel out of this one.
Yeah, the really sad part about this right now is now that the queen is not knowledgeable, because I'm sure he was trying to, his plan was to get the Inquisitor set up to pull the queen to nuke the rest of the board so that Papaya couldn't capitalize with a fool. Now he's in a really dangerous position where he played his princess and gave away his elder. And now Papaya is very well positioned to be able to fool to require that princess back. Dan is now going to have to find some way to get the soldier to disgrace the princess, to still play around the fool, while also holding double Inquisitor in his hand with nothing really able to be called because he calls anything and it's too big of a number for him to play around now. So it's a very, very difficult situation at this point.
Yeah.
The good
Yep.
thing is he has the zealot, but the problem is now that the princess is available, before there was no royalty that he could have to play around with his zealot. Now he's potentially introduced another royalty now in an endgame scenario where Papaya can especially trade with him, which is even more detrimental too for the endgame state. So, and he's still got to play around the assassin. Yeah, Papaya has that saving grace of the queen being out and this line enlightening him to that now. Unless Dan is like insane and is bluffing that now, because that would be crazy too, right?
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I'm just trying to calculate the lines here for victory here. And there's not too many paths I see now. I think. What do you think Papaya's next play is going to be?
Probably he could flip. Um, by flipping, it allows him access to the warlord, and then Dan has to decide because Dan would probably have to go Inquisitor,
Mm-hmm.
call Assassin, and he would miss. And then
Mm,
Papaya plays Warlord, which is then a 9, and then Dan has to flip or play Oathbound, and then that leaves the opening for Papaya to Fool to get the princess back. So I will probably see Papaya flip at this point.
yeah, I think the problem that's the real big issue, I think, is essentially royalty, right? That kills the zealot. Um, and that fool is his conduit to that.
If
And I
Papaya also plays Oathbound, that's really bad for Dan as well.
Oathbound's pretty
Because then he
good.
would,
Yeah, Oathbound's pretty
yeah.
pretty brutal. But then the main thing I think, just thinking for a second here, I think, yeah, if you can get that fool somehow or disgrace that princess, then Dan has a shot to victory. You know what I mean?
How would, because I think
Because if he
playing
so
Oathbound here,
yeah,
Dan
Oathbound's
would
one of
have
his
to
few
flip,
ways to
right?
get rid of stuff. Yeah, if he plays if Papaya plays Oathbound right now, it's pretty tough. And that like, okay, there's a couple ways Dan can get out of this. One of them is the Oathbound, the other one is the Zealot. Papaya has Oathbound potential to pick. Sorry, full potential to pick up the princess, and mystic potential to kill Oathbounds or zealots. So it's just tough. But here we go. Dan's got a bit of a shot here because the sentry's played without any usage.
Man, I'm gonna feel so bad when Dan goes Oathbounder into Inquisitor Call Assassin and he's gonna miss.
You mean what's about to happen?
Yeah,
You know, you could hit the soldier right now and disgrace the princess, but there it is. Yeah, there's the thing you were feeling bad about.
yeah. So now Dan goes, okay, well, he doesn't have the assassin, so I'm free to flip until Levi now flips. And
Yeah.
then Dan has to use his Inquisitor to call assassin again.
There he kills
Ooh.
the so he's getting rid of now he knows Dan, you got nothing else. You got nothing else for me. Um by killing the zealot, I think that should take care of it. Um yeah, I think
So yeah,
uh,
there's no way for Dan to make this a 1 point game, is there? It
there
would have to
is.
be
There is. And it's a
how many if you
crazy
do
play.
this?
Let me tell you. This is some crazy stuff. Dan plays a soldier right now, right? Disgracing whatever he could disgrace. It doesn't matter. Um, uh, and then if Papaya flips, oh, the problem is the king could still be face up and he could lose the point that way. But I was gonna
Yeah.
say he plays the Inquisitor, calls the Fool, then plays his Broken Zealot. Bam! No more cards. But the problem is that Papaya has to flip before that plan can come into action, and it requires quite a lot of different things to work. So I still like my plan though.
So at least he knows Assassin isn't in hand. Flipping here would be really inefficient for him. With Papaya just having that Warlord chilling, though, is so scary because that just is going to come down and just kind of decimate anything that Dan has available to him. So it really kind of comes down to how conservative Papaya is going to be here, I think,
Yeah,
and where he's going to find his leverage on the Fool.
yeah. I think Dan's best play right now is actually to hit a soldier without or purposefully missing a soldier, and then Papaya will play the Oathbound. He flips, but then Papaya has that Fool in order to pick up something, which gets rid of the plan that I had. Which, if that plan works out, I'm gonna be so happy. I don't think it does, but being able to inquisit, oh no,
Ooh.
that is this is just
Ugh.
L after L on the guesses there. Um,
Yeah, that's rough.
boy, unfortunate, but yeah, no, I think I would have really liked to see Inquisitor Fool play in some future of the game. This is now where Dan. I don't think Dan has any really recourse to
I
getting
mean,
out of this.
what if he goes
Soldier no ability.
no ability? Yeah, and now Papaya has to play.
Papaya plays his Oathbound here. Yeah. Now he has to flip, and then he plays Warlord.
Yeah,
That's it. There it is.
I was gonna say Papaya play the
And it's a.
Fool.
Just to be clear, this is yeah. He loves the Fool so much, right? Just to be clear, this is an empowered Warlord. So
Yeah.
this is a +2. Anyways, good games to both competitors. I think that last game was a real barn burner of a match. We've got the final score 7 Papaya, and we'll have to say goodbye to Dan from the tournament, but not goodbye from the casting chair because part of me, we still get one benefit of him not being a part of the tournament, which is we get to see him back in the casting seat alongside me and a notorious BLT. Of course, you're still in the tournament, so we'll have to wait
For
until you.
now,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
getting scary.
might make it all the way. We'll see. And it looks like you just have one more. Is it one more game you have to win before you meet Papaya in the tournament, or how does that work?
Yeah. So now I have my rematch against Yeti. We played in Swiss, and I beat him in Swiss. But now we're gonna have to play again in losers bracket, and then Levi will have to
Oh.
play on his opposite end of bracket. And if we both win, we'll be able to play each
I
other.
see.
But
You both have like a challenger to your fated.
yep.
All right.
But I think overall that game was a great display again of exactly what we said. Levi chose to go second and hold the Fool. My prioritizing card value. That was his entire game plan, and every game he ended with an extra card, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was yeah, I mean that was a tough game on both players. I feel like there was difficulty on knowing what cards were face down. We saw a lot of the royalty take a sideline. Let's see what the minions think kind of
Hmm.
approach. And that's a really tough position to be in, especially when there's so many things to already consider. Do they have this card? How do I play around this card? And
Yeah.
then accidentally revealing information when you miss those calls, like that is the calculus that you have to have in order to make the decisions that you do. And I think Dan was real unfortunate near there at the end. So
Yeah, Dan, he just had a lot of poor hands that he actually got to play that game. The good hands that he got mulliganed away multiple times, and then the king's hand just being out pretty much the entire match definitely denied him the ability to really be able to be a little bit more comfortable, play around certain things when he needed to, and just not really be on the receiving end of having all the information. Especially with Levi going second, he just was able to really control what information was around and how he wanted to play around it very easily, I think.
yeah, and he got a lot of the cans that that you were saying is like his favorite hands, right? He's got like a
Yeah.
lot of the fools. He's got a lot of the ability to go second. That last hand was really tempting him. I actually would have loved to see what it would have been like if it was the other way around too. It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting, you know. There's so many. I think that last hand had so many lines, and the fact that Papaya threw away the assassin. If the score wasn't the way it was, if this was the first game of the match, I feel like it would have been different as well. So
Hmm.
let's go ahead and pull. Let's pull Dan in first and see how you know what's shaking. So let's get him in here. Greetings.
Hey, hey,
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I
Yep.
think so. How are you doing?
Well, scoreline looks pretty good considering I didn't win a single hand that match, but it was great. I mean, Papaya played terrifically, and this is how things go sometimes.
Yeah. That I mean that was a tough match. There was lots of hand discrepancy. I feel like going back and forth, and you tried the battery a couple times, and he was using that to kind of flip and use as a fool quite a lot. How did you feel when you noticed that he was essentially trying to find lines for his fool almost every single game?
Well, that's the reason why I made that odd Oathbound into Sentry play in the later game, because precisely because I was trying to play around the fool, which I knew was going to come at some point.
Right.
Um, the Yeah, I gotta tell you, Cena, it might have a fun name. I'm not sold on the battery. I would guess probably the win rate of a battery play. It's usually sort of desperation where you don't have the right tools for the job, as when you deploy the battery, just to try to put some number pressure on the other player, but you'd really rather have something else that you're playing behind the judge than just the soldier. Um, but yeah, clearly the fool is going to get used frequently. It was used effectively in the first hand. I actually felt okay holding those first two hands at 2 points. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, I kept my mulligan. Yeah, I could have got, I mean, both of them were one card away from being, Exodia hands. Like the first one was one card away. The second one only had the Mystic as an assassin counterplay and otherwise wasn't that strong. So I thought, okay, I call that, par for those first two, just being down 4-0. Um, and yeah, it just thinking through that last hand again, a piece of meta I should have listened to myself on was that Papaya took a long time at the start to think through his hand. And I should have known at that point that meant no queen,
Yeah.
because it would have been a lot less time there. But I didn't have the courage of my convictions as I played that hand. And granted, what I would have done with the judge, if not guessing queen, would have been assassin anyway, which he burned. So it's very painful to miss on three guesses in one hand, because there's only two mystery cards. But that's just how or well, I guess that is three mystery cards, and I managed to find all three of them. Not the way I wanted to, but that's how it is. And Papaya played fantastically there, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah, and
You know,
I think that was aptly said. And we were talking about how he was taking a long time, and it's crazy that you're able to pick up on that too. Like you were like, I should have listened to that nagging in the back of the head. But as you mentioned, it was Queen and Assassin, and also Warlord, which was the three cards. Really unfortunate that last hand. I think it could have been played a lot of different ways, and you got unfortunate with those guesses there.
Yeah, it was yeah, that's the game in it, That's the these are very narrow margins when you're playing people who are this good. So, you gotta use everything at your avail. I gotta have the courage of your convictions. What can I say?
The hand before, there was a curious play where you guessed on the Inquisitor, on a judge. He played a soldier, guessed the assassin, got +2 on his soldier, and then you played your soldier and you guessed the assassin as well. You had the Oathbound. One of the Oathbounds was face up. The other one was in your hand. Was wondering why you decided not to disgrace something with your so you could enable your mystic there.
I figured I was going to play the Mystic as the number, and I was informed that we are having a furniture delivery coming in 5 minutes when that play was coming, so I didn't notice that he guessed assassin. I just saw I missed, and so I decided to do something very unlike me, which is to play head games by guessing assassin when I had it in my hand, soldier back, not knowing that that's what he had guessed of me.
It's a different level of head
So
game.
yeah, just entirely, just full Charlie Kelly wild card kind of I guess back on that. But yeah, I'd like to think that say that as a big brain play was actually just me being kind of distracted and careless in terms of what I was doing there.
Gotcha. In that hand, I mean, that was a fantastic hand. I mean, I think you were able to barely. He had the Inquisitor to get your assassin. Otherwise, you had a really cool line there where you're able to play the Mystic without its value, forcing him to play his princess, and then you Oathbound soldiered to get him to play his queen, so that way his fool was not enabled. Really cool. I thought that was an awesome line, and I think there's a couple of lines actually, despite the hands being kind of crazy this entire match, especially that last one. There's a lot of really cool things. At one point, I was saying if Dan missed inquisits his fool, then he'll be able to win or like to like lose with a 1 point hand. But I don't think it was actually a line. I was just saying like, those are the types of crazy theory crafting we were doing over here.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were some very entertaining hands,
Yeah.
and I was just talking with Papaya, because the first two hands it was a soldier face down burn. And soldier face down burn, those are always very conventional hands because no one plays around the soldier typically. So I was kind of bemoaning him like, boy, it's probably pretty boring to watch. And then of course the next two, the princess was the face down burn in both, which played haywire in both cases. I think in one case Papaya threw away a hand. And he's like, oh geez, if I'd known that, I probably wouldn't have mulliganed that. And then the other one where he just playing very oddly because again we are anticipating something that wasn't there. So, it's part of the fun of it. The breaks break all sorts of ways. But in a seven point match, you have to anticipate the breaks will go in either direction. Papaya just made more out of his breaks.
Yeah, and that last hand would have been completely different if it wasn't for a game point too. And I think that's also really interesting too. But Dan, thank you so much for participating. Always a pleasure to have you. It's unfortunate that we have to say goodbye to you in the arena floor, but obviously we're going to retain your services for casting up here. Is there anything you want to say? Anything you want to plug potentially?
Oh, hi, Mom. No. So yes, for those of you, well, see, I can plug this continually, but I'm going to plug it right now too. I wrote an audio drama. It's called Metropolis. It is 13-episode science fiction audio drama, a podcast coming to a podcasting system near you in August. A murder mystery in neon utopia. If that is intriguing you in any way, go to luxradium.org. That's luxradium.org and sign up for a mailing list. We'll let you know when the first few episodes go live. I got to tell you, folks, we have some of the best actors in the Pacific Northwest in this show. I've been in the studio for the last week and a half. This is going to be great. I know it's hubris because I wrote it and producing it. I'm just giving you the straight on this. Get it on the ground floor. I think it actually is going to be a legitimately wonderful show. I've heard the actors performing it, and they're very, very, very good, and they sell the moments. And I highly recommend it. Simbu, I'm excited. There's a great match tonight. I'm really looking forward to casting, and I know you're looking forward to me losing, so that you don't have to work around me being in the tournament for the casting schedule. So I'm really thrilled about this evening. I'm excited for Papaya too. Played wonderfully, and I'm sad obviously to lose, but now I got to go look at this armoire that apparently just showed up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan, and everyone. I popped the link in, and I'll put it in the video as well. Always love to promote content creators, even inside the world of Necessity and outside of it. Dan obviously is a fantastic caster, and as you could probably imagine, has a great creative mind for being able to do lots of different works, lots of range of works. A writer, a caster. He's done quite a lot. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tonight. Thank you for participating in the tournament, and we will see you soon.
Thank you all, and yeah, thanks again. See you tonight.
Well, that was nice. That was a nice kind of introduction, I think, to Papaya. He was saying how Papaya was playing through those hands masterfully. And I really especially like it. I think this is true when you're playing with the higher echelon of gameplay. There's like a real narrow window where you can make those calls, and he just didn't have the right calls in the end there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, tough calls to make too, especially with the little information he had. So I definitely feel from our guy Dan, but he played very well with what he had.
That's right. Papaya. Not working.
Sorry.
Now it works.
Keep the wrong microphone. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, congratulations! You've made it one step further to through the bracket to make it to the grand finals, and one more step further to playing your friend Drip Drop Dando.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that game?
That game was stressful. As you saw, we kept having power cards out, which makes both players feel like they're in a worse spot than they actually are. And so from my perspective, a lot of those hands, I thought I was really behind. And I thought Dan was super ahead. But it turned out that Dan thought he was just like even. So him not pressuring as hard on those hands helped out. But I gave him 4 points on playable hands, thinking they weren't playable, which was rough. But overall, it was a very fun set. Just that last hand was absurd. I know you guys saw how long I thought on that.
Yeah.
I didn't think about how much of a tell that would be. Luckily, Dan identified that I probably was in a really bad spot, so a power card was out, like one of the royals, but then still ended up inquisiting the queen at one point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do we want to talk through that last hand? I think that was the most interesting one.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that hand as we were going through, because you were talking, or you took very long at the beginning, so we were kind of going through all the different options that there could be throughout the course of the hand. But the king's hand was out for like most of that game, which was the whole match, which was crazy. I said he was like retired for that event.
Right? That made things really awkward.
Yeah. I think another thing we talked a lot about that you demonstrated throughout the course of this entire match was that going second in the Fool is the new meta. Because even there was multiple rounds. Well, you think it may be underperformed, but you were ending the games with Fool in hand, and even though you didn't get to play it, you made it really awkward for Dan in a number of those games, which he stated. But even where we said him having to play around the Fool ended up netting you advantage a lot of times because he was put in really negative positions. So did you feel, because you're saying it underperformed, how do you feel that it was underperforming in those games?
Well, I mean, it still performed well in that aspect, but normally I think it's the best card in the game. In this set, it was probably not the best card in the game, just high tier.
So what was the best card in the game?
This is a good question.
Soldier?
Soldier. It's always Soldier.
It might have been Soldier. No, I don't know. I don't know. Every card was so impactful. That's outside of King's Hand when it was out all the time.
It's good.
I'm not sure. It's tough. I don't think there was a clear best anywhere in that or throughout that set, which I think Fool is often a clear best in my eyes.
Did it hurt you to go first on that last hand?
It did. It did. It hurt so much. I was like, I want to go second, but I realize I lose the game if I go second.
Okay, I
Yeah.
guess we did talk the last hand to death, and it's one that, as we mentioned, could have been completely different if the score was 0-0. Could have been different if you decided to go first. Go second. Could have been different if you didn't throw away the assassin. I just actually wanted to run through your thought process when you got your hand. You thought for a while. You threw away the assassin. What was your thought process behind throwing away the assassin?
The idea behind throwing away the assassin was that I believe I needed every other card in my hand. I wanted to have access to the both soldiers. I wanted to lead soldier, and then I wanted to find a window to play another soldier if needed to flip cards, and that would give me the ability. Oh, thank you for putting that on screen. Having access to the second soldier would give me the ability to flip cards face down. So one line of theory I had in that game was we start with the soldier. Other stuff gets played. For example, actually, I guess there wasn't a great thing he could play that would stop anything from getting flipped immediately. But the thought process was I may need to use the soldier to disgrace stuff in order to turn on the mystic, which I guess might not have been accurate. I suppose using the soldier as a way of bullying cards out of his hand was potential, because I did have pretty high numbers. It was just I didn't have answers for 2 royals if he inquisited me.
Gotcha.
So one of the lines of play is I wanted to find a window to mystic away Inquisitor, and that would protect my Oathbound.
Gotcha.
Another option was if I could get an Oathbound into play from his hand, then I would be able to sentry back an Oathbound, and then have access to the second one.
I see. Yeah, it makes sense.
But assuming he had all of the like power cards, or like almost Exodia, which is what I was doing at first, is I couldn't figure out a line that was better than 50-50. Or rather, he would have 2 different lines. So
and to remind everyone at home, when he's saying Exodia, this is if he had both royalty. Papaya only had an Oathbound, and if that Oathbound went away, then Dan would have been able to win by just playing double royalty.
Right. So the soldier lead, which I think ended up being correct, if he goes Oathbound Inquisitor and pulls my Oathbound from hand, I just lose the game. Was my perspective. But because he didn't have a lot of the high numbers, it was either that or play a royal, were like his 2 options. I guess he could flip, but he didn't know where the assassin was, and that wouldn't be very smart.
What I was saying actually was that when your back's against the wall, sometimes you flip when you normally shouldn't. Did you have that fear at all that he might actually flip because of the fact that his back was against the wall?
Immediately on the soldier?
Not immediately. I mean, I guess that was one line, but it was later on too when you were putting a little bit more pressure on. But yeah, I think the first one was when you hit the soldier.
Yeah, if he immediately flips, I'm perfectly happy with that, because it gives me the open board to just go with a disgraced card to Mystic, call 4, and he can no longer pull my Oathbound.
Right. Assuming again that he has the queen. This is, as we said, this is.
This is all under the theory that there was there was a queen in his hand. But then I was thinking about it, similar to what the kid had mentioned in his set. There was 2 elders, an Oathbound, and both royals as 5 different cards that if any of those were discarded, then he would not immediately see that Oathbound Inquisitor could just win the game.
Right.
So, I mean, that's 5 out of 9 cards that I haven't seen, if any one of them is out. So I had better than 50% chance of him not even seeing that as a winning line.
I see. Interesting.
And so, yeah, that was the theory there. And then it still came down to whether or not I tuck the Oathbound. It was a tough choice.
And there was a bit of a meta, as you said, where you took a long time, so it should have been a power card that was out. But that also factors into that calculus of, he must have an Oathbound. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion, I think, about this hand in general. I think there's a lot of cool things, especially, you can go review it in the game client itself. But before we end the stream here, is there anything else you wanted to say or bring up in preparation for your next match, etc.?
No, not right off. I was just really enjoying these games, and was I was very afraid of losing that set, just because I want to keep playing in the tournament, because
Well,
I just enjoy playing. And I guess I'll add one other thing.
sure.
That start where I started out 4-0
Yeah.
and then got dealt 3 bad hands in a row that I mulled 2 away. I was getting flashbacks to my last match against Goose, which wasn't on coverage, but it was playing for first, second, and third in our tiebreaker. And I started out 4-0, and then I got dealt 4 bad hands in a row, and I mulled 1 and then played the other 3, and he got 7 points off of it, and I lost there. So that led me to be more aggressive with my mulligans this time, which I didn't get rewarded for because there were power cards out. But looking at those hands, I was like, take your 2 points. I'm not getting 3-pointed on this hand.
Well, and that was the calculus there as well, which is I was like, some players like to play it out just so that way they have the momentum. Some people like to just get it out, clear sight, clear mind, 2 points.
Yeah.
Let's not deal with this. So
Yeah.
well, you're playing against Vilau next. Vilau has dropped from the upper bracket after playing against Goose on a 5-7, I believe,
Yeah.
loss. And so, are you going to study the games before you go into it?
We'll see. Probably,
right.
But
I won't make you expose your secrets. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and we can't wait to see you in the next match.
Yeah, thanks again for hosting this.
Absolutely. So there you have it. We have Papaya. We had Dan. Unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to Dan. Papaya's moving on, and yeah, I mean, fantastic competitor. Lots of thoughts on those last games. Lots of considerations. As you said, he's a very thoughtful player. Likes to go second. Likes to play with the Fool. I think we've definitely got a play style here that we don't see with the other players, and I'm really curious to see how far it goes.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how far he goes with continuing with this strategy, and if any of the other competitors in the tournament start to analyze and start to figure out different strategies to combat that. Because I definitely know that in our games, we've evolved to delving into this going second strategy, and now that has kind of had me to have to discover going first counters to that. So I'm very curious to see if anyone else starts to establish either taking up that meta of playstyle or finding more counters to it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm pretty excited, actually, especially with Vilau, who is a pretty tough competitor. 5-7 versus Goose is a really good score to put up against Goose. It would be really interesting to see you and Papaya, obviously, but after, and not discounting, of course, I believe... Yeah, it's Yeti, right? You have to play against Yeti,
Oh, yeah.
and then
I have to play against Yeti.
you have to win against Yeti, then you guys would fight each other, and then he would fight against whoever loses between Goose and the Kid. And I just think that it's, either of you carrying the torch of going second. I would love to see how that plays out. So for everyone who's watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Drip Drop Dando, for joining me on the couch today and being able to cast. And make sure you catch the game tonight, 8:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, PDT. And otherwise, catch the streams. You can always catch the in-game replays as well. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Stay royal.
Peace.
You have to say stay royal.
Stay royal and peace.
All right, take care.